Hey everybody, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we discover how to run your business like a saint. Today we're speaking with Juan Acosta, the founder of Tabella, a free app for parishes to use in order to engage their community and stay in touch with them. It's a much better option than using a Facebook group or something. He's also the co-founder of Sent Angels, the angel network of Catholic investors associated with Sent Ventures. It's worth noting that if you do qualify to be an angel investor and want to join their network, I definitely encourage you to reach out. And if you're raising money, I would apply to their funding cycles that happen 4 times a year. Apply today. They do have another one that's going to be open for I think about 20 days when the time this airs, and part of that is you might get to pitch at the Sent Summit as well. So I'd encourage you to reach out there. I think it's catholicangels.co is the website. And Juan is just really an incredible individual. As a result, we ended up taking a lot longer. We talked about a lot of things. We went over our allotted time. I think this is going to be closer to an hour and a half episode by the time it's all edited. But some of the key topics that we covered were how Catholic business owners can help foster community in the parish, how he's witnessed God's hand in his life at many times, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship, and how he hires in a way to offer people opportunities. This is very, very close to my heart topic. And then how he thinks Catholics should think about money, how he lives a balanced life while being an entrepreneur, including staying in shape and spending time with his family, and then how he uses adoration as a key decision-making tool in his business. We covered a lot more than that. But those are some of the major areas. And one last thing before we get into the show is that if you are looking for a community of other Catholic entrepreneurs, join the Catholic Founders Guild today. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. Just click upgrade to paid in our Substack, and we'll get you joined. Assuming everything's a good standing, we make sure everybody gets vetted before they get in. But if you're looking for that community of Catholic entrepreneurs, join that today. All right, with that, let's get into the show. All right, welcome to the podcast, Juan. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. You'll start seeing the sheep behind me in just a
Amazing.
little bit. I live a little bit on the countryside, and so hopefully they make an appearance here.
I really hope so. I'm a big fan of sheep. Maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is they're relatively easy to maintain, but have a little two income streams.
Yeah, I don't have them. It's my neighbor, so
Oh, I
he
see,
has
I
like
see.
50 of them. So I get the benefit of looking out and thinking of Bible passages, and he has the burden to actually take care of all of them. So.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I was gonna say, if you do that in addition to all the other things you do, man, you are really Superman. But yeah, for people who do not know who you are, give us just a quick intro on who you are and what you're working on today.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm, God's creation, a child of God, and that's first and foremost, I would say, my identity. Lately, I stepped into my true vocation. So about 6 months ago, actually, yeah, a little bit over 6 months ago, I got married, and now I stepped into fatherhood, and so we've got a little baby on the way, and so those are the big things in terms of vocation, in terms of who I am. In terms of work, I kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship and building things, and so I lead a company that I started called Tabella. Tabella is a community application for parishes. It's totally free for parishes to use to update their entire technology stack at their parish at no cost. That's been doing really well. And then I also co-founded Sent Angels, which is a Catholic angel network. And so we invest in Catholic values aligned or Catholic companies that advance Catholic values. And that's typically Catholic founders.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
you can find more about that at catholicangels.co. And I do a few other interesting things, but I would say that, my big work is Tabella, and, with Sent Angels is a thing that we started about a year ago, and it's been doing really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff we can dive into. I'd say, I'll just maybe give a little bit more of the kind of founding story of Tabella, and specifically, I'm curious to have you share more about about the business model and how you've approached this tool, and just a little bit more about the tool itself.
Sure. I guess we'll start there because then the founding stories I think a lot longer. But in terms of Tabella, it's the number one free Catholic app for parishes and groups. And so the business model, you may be wondering, like, how is it free? Like, when I looked at the industry per se, or when I was getting very serious about actually launching this, I noticed that a lot of the software out there built for churches was either super outdated, or for the most part, the communications method, the primary communications method was still paper. If you grab one of those bulletins, that's technically the primary way that churches communicate with their parishioners. And so when I was looking at everything, I kept seeing technology that was outdated, that then churches were paying a lot of money for when, in the secular world, we have all these flashy tools and super great technology, yet you look at the church stack and it was very outdated. And so it forced churches to even say, oh, you started seeing this shift of like, oh, follow us on Instagram or follow us on Facebook. And for the most part, I think those tools are great to evangelize, right? You see a lot of Catholic influencers, you see priests, you see, even churches just putting content out there in these platforms. But when it comes to nurturing a community, it's just, they're not the right tools. We send our parishioners, we send our community, whether it's a ministry group or a parish, to an ocean full of, to be honest, a lot of crap. When you look on these platforms. I'll give you one quick story. I've shown this to different churches at the very beginning is, I looked up a church on Facebook and I took a screenshot of this, and the algorithms on the right, or the ads on the right, driven by the algorithms of these platforms, were showing me ads and shown me a bunch of inappropriate ones. But one in particular at one point was a Planned Parenthood. I think it was a rally or it was the actual organization. But how is it that churches are sending their parishioners to communicate and to be up to date with the parish and all the things going on, and we're sending them there, to really an ocean of bad things? And so, the Catholic world needed a good technology, a place to nurture their communities, and that's what Tabella, set out to achieve. And it's in hundreds of parishes now. And you talked about the business model. We needed to make it free for the parish. There couldn't be any barrier for a parish, no matter if it was a tiny little parish in the middle of nowhere or a big church in a big city. There shouldn't be a decision based on, can we afford this software for our church? And so we said, how do we make this free? And we looked at what's been working in the church for the past 50 years. And bulletins for the most part are free. And so what happens? You have these community advertisers, local mom and pop businesses that want to be seen by their community. And so Tabella adopts that model. And I think it's truly a win for all parties involved. A win for the church staff. They're not spending any money on using the best technology for their parish. That's, to send push notifications, to send email, and it does a bunch of other things. It's a win for the parishioner because the parishioner, we've built a product that's really consumer facing. And so I think that's one of the things that defines Tabella. It's not a church B2B software that only the secretary behind the parish walls knows. It's truly meant for the community. And so on Tabella, you have a massive library of English and Spanish devotional content and other languages. But the parishioner can pray, deepen their devotions, stay up to date with their parish. And so that's all in one package, and it's free for them. There's no subscription walls. There's none of that. And then for a business, and that's really where I grew up. And I think this leads into a little bit of the founding story. You've got these mom and pop businesses, a florist, a plumber, or a real estate agent, or a law firm within the community. There's so many entrepreneurs within our church community that they want to be seen and they want to do more business with their community. And the community, I'd rather do business with the plumber that I see, at my, on the pews every single Sunday than, having to go find a different plumbing company. I don't know why I'm saying plumbing. My bathrooms are okay at home right now, but it's true. I rather help and support a member of our Catholic community. And this is what, society really was like for hundreds and hundreds of years, which everything revolved around the parish. There was a time where, it's like, your local little church and everything revolved around there, from friendships to family to the faith itself to business and business interactions. And it was really around our communities, and society has changed quite a bit because of the growth of everything in cities, etc. But I think Tabella can help play a role in really bringing the Catholic community together again.
It's interesting topic. Just recently, one of my good friends sent me, he sent me this take this test and see kind of where you politically lean in terms of these eight things. I think it's called 8 values. And I was surprised at his results because he was, more so focused on it seemed anti-capitalist. I was like, whoa, what's this guy? What's this about? Because he was never like that. But he's very interested in this idea of distributism and this whole idea I just learned about recently so don't consider me an expert, but is this idea that most businesses were meant to be smaller local businesses. And I think that what you guys are doing could really play into that, where it's not, you're not as a plumber in rural Wisconsin competing with some humongous private equity backed plumbing entity in, who knows, San Francisco or wherever, right? And this way, there's a lot more opportunity to run small businesses. And I think that I'm just very fascinated to see. This is maybe off topic of what we'll talk today, but what you guys are doing could really help kind of produce that more opportunity for local entrepreneurship, if you will. I'll have to get in touch with you to talk to some of these plumbers and these folks. I love to speak with small business owners as well on the pod, so I'll have to get in touch with you
Beautiful.
afterwards. But then let's back up a little bit. So I know it's a long story, but let's try to keep it condensed. Like, what is the founding story of Tabella? How did you end up finding this?
Sure. There was a lot of miracles in my life, and people often ask, oh, like, what was the miracle? Right. And it was a series of things throughout my life that to me, my mom, my dad, my sister were, incredible struggles that all of a sudden got fixed. One of them being immigration, or my dad's health, or finances. There was a lot of things. So we immigrated from Venezuela. I was born in Venezuela, and I got to the U.S. when I was about 8 years old. And so I have that journey of an immigrant family. We really came from nothing. In Venezuela, the situation was pretty bad back then. Still, it's worse now. But I didn't grow up in money. It was always a struggle. I think to most American standards, I would say it was poverty. And I don't like using that word, but it just was not good, and that's what it was. And when we moved to the US, it was thanks to my dad, an entrepreneur himself, and he made really the impossible happen, which was to move our family from this place where, the government's oppressive, where there wasn't opportunities really to start things, where if you wanted to start things, the government would take it away from you. And I've seen many instances of that, to really a place where, in my opinion, we experienced the most amount of freedom, the most amount of opportunity to create things, to build things. And so that was a big thing. Moving to this country, I would say, was huge. As we got into the US and American society, etc., I really saw God's hand play a huge role through the Catholic community. So what does a Hispanic family first do when they get to the US? They find their parish. They find their Catholic community. And you look at Latin America as over 400 million Catholics, right? And so you look for your parish, and the parish really became our family, our immediate family per se, just because it was just the four of us here in this country. We didn't, there weren't cousins and uncles and none of that. It was just us. And so the parish really became that. And my dad went through a lot of things health-wise, and he lost a big business that he dedicated years and years to build. And during that time, when he was at his lowest, I saw how some people acted, that he had helped quite a bit. Then I also saw, and I only realized this way later, I also saw how the people that helped us the most were the actual parishioners of our church that perhaps didn't know us, or, didn't necessarily have dinner with us every week, but it was just people we would see. And even to this day, sometimes when my dad's needed to go to the hospital for his health conditions or to a doctor's appointment, like, these are the people that first raise their hands and are there for us. And so I think that played a huge role, seeing these interactions and what they did for me. I dropped out of an aerospace engineering program twice, actually, but the very first time was because I needed to work and provide for our family. And the very first, so here I was studying aerospace engineering, thinking I was gonna, be this massive engineer, and I was a very good student. And all of a sudden, I find myself working at a flower shop, which is really interesting. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but it was a big shift of the trajectory that I thought I had mapped out. But that job taught me so much, and it was given to me by a Catholic in the community that wanted me, and gave me a dignified work. It wasn't like, oh, here's money or pity. No, it was, hey, I have a job, and you guys are in need. Do you want to come work for me? And that was such a blessing. And more of those things started happening. So all of that trickled in. The big moment, I would say, where I shifted everything and said, I'm going to go start Tabella is, I was living in Silicon Valley, and I was going through a lot of immigration related things. My family and I did things the right way ever since we got to this country. And it was visa after visa after visa. You can't imagine the amount of money that has sunk into that entire process. But there was at one point where there was an unsolvable situation, and that's for another story and not necessarily for the podcast. But my lawyer was getting ready to say, hey, Juan, you're going to have to leave the country so that you don't stay here illegally, and you'll have to come back many years later or figure something out if this is really where you want to be. And so here I had grown really in this country, a country that I love, and I had gotten into a very high position in the tech world, and it was awesome. And here I was, life was going to change completely. And there was a big miracle at that immigration meeting that even my lawyer doesn't even know how to explain. But, months later, I got my stamp for my residency, and I became a permanent US resident, and the process after that. But it was just unexplainable. And we've had so many of those moments, specifically with my mom, my dad, and my sister. And I just saw true miracles happen that didn't have any other explanations when people look at it. It's truly God that intervened. And so that's when I asked myself, why does he want me in this country? Why did he give me this opportunity? What am I doing with my talents? And I wasn't necessarily in that moment, but when looking back in hindsight, it truly was the catalyst to start deepening my faith more. It was the catalyst to say, hey, what are my talents? What does God want to do with them? And that started a trajectory of discovery and led to Tabella, which was an idea he put in my heart when I was like 16 years old. I never thought anything of it. I would sit in mass, and maybe I shouldn't have been doing this when I was a teenager, but I would sit in mass and I would read the bulletins and count the little local advertisers in the back, and I knew all of them, like which one was the florist, which one was the real estate, just because that's where I was glued. And so I think he placed this seed in my heart from that moment. Then all the things that I saw in my Catholic community and how they, really helped us tremendously. And then all the miracles beyond that. And I think all of that created this storm and this perfect storm to then launch Tabella.
Yeah.
And all the other things that now I'm focused on.
Yeah, I would also just mention, you didn't tell the story exactly, but it would also probably partially be due to your exposure to Silicon Valley, right? And just seeing the entrepreneurship stuff that it then clicked. I am curious, did you always recognize these kind of, God's hand moments as you were experiencing them, or was it mostly retroactively?
There were moments where I felt it, if it was like truly strong. I think there was a period of my life where I was somewhat upset with myself, and I took it on myself a lot, even though all these situations were happening. When I first had to leave school, like I had won the scholarship to study at the best aerospace engineering program in the country, and I went for a full year, and it was kicking butt. It was awesome. And then next semester, it's like boom, I'm working at a flower shop. And so I went through a lot of moments during that time, and then I saw my dad get sick. I think a lot of this was with that, and seeing his, I would say, like a light turn off. He's this entrepreneurial spirit, and these health situations were so incredibly stressful that I saw his health, affected beyond what the condition was, and depression and all these things. And so I saw all of this, and I was kind of mad of like, why am I not doing bigger things? And I know that I am capable of all these things. And so I launched. That led me to start a little tiny business that then became a little bigger and started making websites for local businesses. These same people at my parish were the first customers, essentially. So to your question, because maybe I derailed there a little bit, sometimes I did feel it. A lot of it was in hindsight of seeing all these dots start connecting. And I always grew up Catholic in a very devoted family, and I would say I leaned away from it quite a bit in my early 20s as part of all of this stuff. And just, I somehow at that time, I also made money more of an idle and right. And I was like, but it was in a way out of necessity per se of wow, like we don't have money to pay for rent next month, or we have $20 in the bank account and the grocery bill is going to be 200, whatever it was. Right. And so, yeah, I think I started seeking, that's really what led me into entrepreneurship. It was just out of necessity. It's like, I need to start something, or I need to say yes to this opportunity and this opportunity. And it kind of, led me into the entrepreneurship side of things.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective. I think this is, actually just today, I think one of the readings was about envying or seeking possessions. And, the thing I think about a lot is when people, and I can relate to your kind of upbringing from to an extent with the financial side of things. Like when you are at a certain low point, it's very difficult to remain focused on God because you don't have the basics covered, right? And so some people say, "Oh, you got to be focused on poverty and being very poor." But I say, well, that's not really the case, right? Because it's actually, there's a lot of ways that the devil can really. It's not to say you can't, be poor and holy, but I don't think it's necessarily noble to intend to be, struggling to get by and everything. So I think that this is just maybe one point for people to consider, is that if you don't have at least the basics covered from a financial perspective, it can be very challenging in life. But, there's a lot of things we could talk about. I do want to shift a little bit to talk about this community building aspect. So throughout your whole story, you mentioned that the parish has kind of been central to getting opportunities, helping you take care of your family items. How do we build true communities in the church right now? And I think what you're doing with Tabella, to me, is very critical to do this. But I'm just really frustrated myself sometimes with how, especially in America, I don't know if maybe it has to do with kind of being a more Latin-based parish, that people were more helpful. But a lot of people in America are very individualistic, even as Catholics, and they're not necessarily willing to go help. And oftentimes they're not willing to ask for help either. At least that's what I've perceived. So how do you think we can start fixing that?
Yeah, it most definitely, at least from my experience, has been, I've seen a big difference in let's say the Latino parish and the solely English speaking parish, right? I live in Texas. And so, there's a good mix, but for the most part, it's all English speaking, at least where I'm at. But I've been to parishes in Miami, which is where I grew up, and it's completely different. I don't necessarily have the solution, but from what I've seen of what has worked, at least for my family and seeing all the people help us, it's truly focusing on God's commandment of loving Him above all things. But right after He says, love your neighbor, right? And so it's really a call that He gives us, and like He's telling us to go do that. And I think you and I discussed this a little bit prior to this, but sometimes we think I have to go build this massive thing and help someone across the world, but it could start right there, the people closest to you, first your family, right? And then the circles right away from that. And if you've hopefully designed a life where, the parish or the mass and adoration or whatever the things that you're devotionally that you're doing, that you're focused around building a family that is focused on God and has a church nearby that you constantly attend, I think it naturally leads to that. I think, I'll give you an example. I mean, I lived in California and the churches closed during the pandemic, and that's when I was launching Tabella, and it was so hard even to get a meeting with, and maybe it was a result of the pandemic, but meeting with a church team and giving them, like, hey, I'm this young guy trying to build these things. Can you please just give me a meeting? I just want to talk to you. And even that was, but then I would see communities in Miami, like from our friendships, that the moment we launched the first version of the product, like they were using it every day and raving about it. And it was like the worst product that you could think of. But it was from a sense of, wow, he's doing something for our church. This is how we can support it, by actually using it. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but I do see a massive difference in the way, and maybe it stems from that need that you're saying, like, hey, if we ask for things, and in the Hispanic community, especially immigrant families, you're thrown into this world where it's like you don't know the language, you don't know anything else. And so you gravitate to the people that share your values, your faith, and that really becomes your go-to people.
Yeah.
And so naturally everything happens there. But by the way, half of the church, and I don't think a lot of, I would say, companies or people working within the church perhaps are speaking about this, but half of the church in the US will be, Spanish speaking in the next probably like 5 to 10 years, maybe less. I think it's already like 40 something percent. And so maybe naturally you'll see some of that, of those elements. I definitely see a lot of things, even in the English speaking parishes, of different ministry groups and in Spanish that meet often. And there's this, melting pot of things going on. And so maybe that's part of it, but it's truly focusing on God's command of loving thy neighbor. And it doesn't have to be someone across the world. It can literally be the person you see after Mass and just sparking a conversation.
I would argue that it should be first to people,
Yeah.
in the pews with you. And, I guess you didn't offer any particular, remedies, if you will, but my assumption is that it really stems initially from where do people's hearts lie? Are they, if they're genuinely focused on their faith life as the most important thing, I think they would naturally be more drawn to spend more time at church. And I again, there's ways that you can bring them in maybe deeper. So, from a business owner's perspective, I'm always trying to convince people, like, find some way to be more involved with the parish to kind of help foster that community, because we can't just go about our merry way. We have to work together and help each other, buy from each other. I know here in Wasa, the men's group chat's always like, hey, I've got to build a deck or something. Does anybody here like know a good carpenter or whatever?
Nice.
And there's no like formal way of doing it other than this group chat, which is great. But also, a lot of people aren't going to always be checking the group chat. Like, there's so many problems around it. So I wonder if if people really care about this, if they could start, hosting a men's group, hosting a Bible study, like doing something to bring the community closer. And to me, just the very idea of having a place where the local businesses can advertise is a big, big solution to that as well, right? But where I go, there are no advertisements in the bulletin, so it's a little different because it's a Latin Mass community with the Institute of Christ King. So it's a little different, but we're gonna have to think about this, man. I think after the pod, you and I are gonna have to come together and give a little, like, a 10-point list of how business owners can do this.
You are right about the groups, though. Like, if you look at least the communities I grew up in, my mom had a retreat group, and the women would meet every single, like, 2 times per week, and that became really like the closest people. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be as the church as like just going to Mass and I'm going to meet people after Mass. It's really the groups that happen within the parish, whether it's the Knights of Columbus or the Emmaus retreat groups, or the ladies that get together every Wednesday to pray a rosary. I think there's a lot there. So maybe incentivizing more of those, like you're saying, more of the creation of these groups within the parish for different kinds of people. I mean, you have the standard, the youth group, and then the men's group and the women's group, but maybe there's an opportunity for more in each parish.
Yeah, and I think there's also this idea, if I'm not mistaken, that really stems from, I don't know where it stems from, but the Opus Dei embody this really well, that every person has a personal apostolate, right? Where they have people that they encounter, they will make an effort to have lunch with them every, once a month or every so often, just to keep developing those relationships and to really be there for people, because a lot of times people are struggling, but they don't talk about it because they don't feel comfortable to talk about it, right? And in our culture, it's not exactly nice to ask for help, right? Unfortunately. So I think that there's just so many things we can do as individuals to remember that the people who are put in our life, some of them will feel drawn to, and we should really kind of develop those relationships in a meaningful way. You got to eat dinner anyways. Might as well invite a family over to have dinner with you. Cool. I think from here, I'd like to move over to just really briefly, because we're going to run out of time if we talk about all these topics. Money tends to make a lot of people uncomfortable, and I think that talking about money in the Catholic faith is something that not a lot of people are enjoying it just naturally. Do you have any particular takes on how Catholics should approach making money? I know we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but just kind of curious what your thoughts are, and being generous towards local business owners, being willing to support them instead of viewing it as sort of a, oh man, they're just trying to get our money, like actually support them. Do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, my whole story has revolved really around seeing that, right? And I've seen kind of a little bit what you mentioned, but I've been on the other side for a long time of not having, money to, even make ends meet, or especially in Venezuela, when I still have vivid memories of that, of the things that my parents would have to do. And so, I've always like seeked to get out of that. But really, and you mentioned this, it's having God at the center. And so when people see money, it's because they're pinning it against, I would say, the faith. It's like, you read the Bible scriptures and there's a lot about poverty, but a lot of that also gets taken out of context in terms of, hey, what the poverty that Jesus is really speaking about. And there's a spiritual poverty, right? That is probably the thing that we need to get out of. And so I've been, on that side of not having anything. And I've also been very fortunate, after many years to be in a position to be able to even invest in either startups or, even local businesses. I have a small local business here in Austin. So let's see. I think money really is an amplifier, and you've probably heard this. It's kind of cliche, but I really think it's true. If we don't have God at the center, if we don't have our faith at the center of things, then and you have money, it'll naturally amplify all the things that lead either others away from God or lead yourself even farther and farther. When you focus on God being the center of the entire equation of your life, of your family, and that's what you're seeking first and foremost, right? Getting into heaven and spending eternity with him. And then you have money, it amplifies all of that. And so then you can evangelize with the things that you do, no matter the amount of money. And so I think it's an amplifier. I don't think it needs to be and I see, because I grew up in very poor communities also, where it's, it also leads down, I've seen things because of poverty or because of not having enough. It also leads you away from even bigger opportunities because of the way you start thinking of like, oh, I'll give an example at the florist shop. Oh, we can't charge $80 for this thing because that's just way too much money. Let's charge $40. Yeah, but you spent $45 making it. And so then you start being contractive, right? Like you start getting into this zone of like, oh, money is this, how can we charge $80 for this thing? But no, it's work. It's doing something good and bringing joy into someone else's life, or going into a hospital to bring joy to somebody that needs to just see the flowers. So I think it's an amplifier. I don't see it as, and I had to get away a lot from this mentality of just being so restricted. I've seen some of the most incredible people I've met in terms of the faith. You see how they operate in business, and you see that they have businesses and that they have money, but you don't see it as like, oh, they've got this pile of cash sitting there. No, they're wanting to be good stewards of this money and invest it into other entrepreneurs and invest it into the community and also donate philanthropically. But I just naturally lean to business just because I think there's something beautiful there that God calls us to create, and with money, be able to amplify that and be a good steward of it. I see money as an amplifier of the things that you already are. And so if we focus on the right thing, which is seeking God, I think if you do have money, it's a multiplier of things.
So you just have to put it in order, right? So if you put first God and then you seek him, then if you do have money eventually, you'll continue to seek God and to use it for good purposes. I also just like this idea that it's kind of like it can become a scarcity mindset if you're not careful, where it's like, oh, I only have this much and somebody else has more. But if you think about God, his grace is not something scarce, right? It's abundant, and we talk about it in that way. And it's not that we should focus only on the money. What I always want to ask people this question, I'm trying to get to the bottom of how we should really figure this problem out. And to me, it's always come back to, if you are just focused on the money, whether you're poor or rich, if all you care about is the money piece, if you're like, oh man, that person's rich and they're going to hell, or you're rich and you just want to make more money because it's about the dollar signs, you're never going to be in the right thing. So you can be let's say greedy or too focused on money, regardless if you have lots of it or a little bit of it. And I think that's what we need to just recognize, so that we focus on God first, and then use our skills, use our co-creative kind of nature to build things, and to not have a scarce mindset, and to trust in the Lord as we build. So I feel like you and I should chop this up again in some other time, and maybe make some frameworks here. I think we could come up with some interesting items, but let's keep moving. What are some of the ways that God has specifically, or the things you've learned through entrepreneurship? Anything particular, like on the spiritual side?
I've had to truly learn how to trust God more and more along the way. Entrepreneurship, when you're building something and all the responsibilities you have, whether it's with stakeholders and shareholders and customers and all of this, it can get pretty stressful. You hear about this, that, oh, it's a roller coaster and you have really high highs, really low lows. A lot of that has forced me to learn how to trust God more. As an entrepreneur, perhaps that entrepreneurialism, a lot of people see, say, the CEO, the founder, or like someone that's starting something as like they've got to control everything. Like they've got control on what's happening over here and here and here and here. And so in a way, there was a shift, and it's been through those like dark moments, not only with the things I do now, but in the past, in those dark moments of I truly am not in control, and it's forced me to put everything in front of God and just saying, oh, God, you take this. If you have to take this away from me, some of my prayers have been like, please do it, but try to do it swiftly and like that it's not as painful. And then all of a sudden he changes things and crazy things happen. Someone will call me and it led to some other thing and it led to a big customer. And I'm thinking of some things in the past. So it's taught me really how to trust God a lot more. And I would say that that's been the biggest, and especially with Tabella. I mean, I've had businesses in the past that I don't think have been as big in terms of, headcount, amount of people that it impacts or users and all of this, right? And so it's been a big thing of like, do you trust me? And especially when I was starting Tabella, it was like the pandemic had just broken out, and I was in California, and my first day on the job of my new job of saying, I am a founder, I am going to go build this thing. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm going to build it. Churches shut down and everything just was closed. And so there was a lot of trust there. And I think it was a question of, are you serious about building this? Even on the capital side, I got, there's a very big, famous Silicon Valley tech investor that was going to be my very first check into the company. And he said, hey, yeah, like I'm going to invest in this. And then we got deeper and deeper, and he started asking me things about, when are you going to spin this out to other religions and to other faiths, the Islam world and the Buddhists. And then, whoa, like it completely went away from the missional aspect of what I wanted to go do. And so that was also a big test, and we had to turn that down. And it was, imagine like the pandemic, we had nothing. It was the first big check of like, here it is. And I think it was a big test, like God asking, do you trust me that I will open the right doors and that I'll give you the right resources that are aligned that will make this mission happen. And a huge thing I've learned is trust, and that, as the entrepreneur, truly to let go of that control, that God has the full control, and I think that helps with a lot of things. And I've, practice more and more of that. I still have a lot to perfect. Yeah. I am not nearly where I need to be in terms of giving up that control and just letting God do his thing.
Yeah, I can relate that a lot. I mean, I think that I tried my best when I started my own business to approach it that way, that I'm going to work hard and, I'm going to put my faith and my family blocks in there, and then the rest of the time is pretty much going to be to work. And if I fail, it's not going to be because I didn't work hard, right? It's because God didn't want me to, and that's okay. And I accept that outcome as a possibility. And I think that if we can do that, it's again resigning to his will. I really appreciate the story you're telling, man. This is really powerful. I am curious. So you guys have a product that is truly beautiful. It's not like some church products that are just kind of look really, really, really poorly built. So you must have at least very, very good talent. Maybe not the best in the world, but very, very good. How do you treat your employees? Is there any particular ways that you do it differently than what you've seen in the past? Like what's common in terms of how startups, treat people?
Yeah, I've worked for all sorts of different people in the past. And, one of the catalysts of like going off and launching something of my own at one point was because I truly, the place I was at was not treating me correctly. We don't have to go into details of which of those places it was, but I saw a lot of things happening where a boss of mine sat me once down and said, like, Juan, I think you are, you're so incredible. Like, and this was for a big promotional moment of something that was going on. And I'm trying to make sure I don't. And so he sat me down and said, you're incredible. And like, you've got great values and you've got all the skill sets to lead this. And there was this other person in the organization that was doing very shady things and our boss knew it. And he literally sat me down and said, but we are going to give this person this thing because at the end of the day, this result, and it was sales at that moment, they've gotten it. And so they literally told me to my face, we are ignoring the fact that this person is doing very shady things in the organization. but we are going to elevate this person because of this one metric, ignoring everything else. And that was really a moment that made me think, whoa, this is not the right way to do things. Sure, there are metrics in business, and there are things happening, but it's a person, and I'm sure later on I saw a bunch of things happen. So that was definitely the wrong decision on his behalf. How do I treat my employees? I don't like to say boasting about the things we do, but one definitely is, we have people from all over the world. And so we haven't restricted to just hiring from, these technology pools in Silicon Valley. You see a lot of that in the venture world per se, or like, oh, this grad from here, or, these are the founding team members. I think, and my team would probably be the one to discuss this, but had open doors to giving an opportunity to a lot of people, and I got a message recently. I just don't like speaking about this because I don't like boasting about what we do.
I
So
think
there's
I just one real quick thing I'll just interject. I think that, I understand you don't want to try to be boastful, but it's very important for other business owners listening to hear the examples of how this is done, because not many people actually put the thought into how to elevate their treatment of their employees and to make sure that they have dignity. So don't be afraid to share this stuff, because it's very important for other people to hear.
Well, one thing is opening the doors. I've given an opportunity, I would say, to quite a lot of people on the team, whether they're still with the company, most of them are, or if they've gone on to different things. But Tabella has been really a launching pad for what they've truly wanted to do, and they've seen the way that we've had non-Catholics on the team before. And maybe that's a small topic there. Before I thought it's like, oh, how do I only hire Catholics because this is a Catholic mission? And I started opening a little bit, and I've seen transformations of people, that have been with us, from the beginning. And I've seen their spiritual transformation. I've seen God use them and use Tabella or the work to, lead them closer and closer to the faith. So that's been a very beautiful thing. And so I haven't, put my walls up of, oh, I only hire, Catholics, or sure, there's a values alignment, there's skill sets, etc. I think I've offered huge opportunity for people that, especially from outside of the country, that have said, I still don't know how I was able to land this opportunity. And they're some of the most incredible engineers. Land this opportunity when no other company would have given me a shot, because I don't even know the English language fully, and we pay them well. They earn way better than if they were working for a company as an engineer in wherever they live. I think one day, my one potential goal of mine, or something I've been thinking about, how cool would it be to be in a position where no matter the global, like where you are globally, that you could pay an engineer the same rate that, say, a Silicon Valley engineer earns. I've been toying a little bit with that, of like is that, could that be really good, or is there something, that would then just offset them in that region? And I don't know, but how cool would it be that that it was truly based on talent, and that it doesn't matter if you're living in Silicon Valley or if you're living, somewhere in Brazil, that what you're paying for that work, that it could be the same. So I've been a little bit playing with that. We don't do that right now, but we beat 99% of of whatever the region is. So they've gotten job offers before, and I've seen what those job offers are. And my goal is to always pay better than that, and that they truly feel, wow, there's this company where I get to, even if they're not, wherever they are in the faith, that God can use my talents to build something great, and I'm rewarded for it. I've seen a lot of transformation in that. There's a lot of things devotionally. Like I start every meeting, even with outside, even secular investors. I've gotten message or looks, because I start every meeting with a prayer, and I ask someone, hey, is it okay if we can pray here before we get started? Kind of like you did here before the podcast. But we do that as a company with pretty much every meeting. Our teams naturally want to do things together, and it's a fully remote team, and so that becomes a little harder. but one department leads a rosary every other week as a team, and we all come together. And so there's a lot of things, and I've seen because we have people all over the world, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela. There's different devotions, which has been really awesome to explore as a team that perhaps I didn't know about or that they didn't know from another segment. So that's been really beautiful. But I think
I
very
really like
loyal.
this.
I've been very loyal, and I think the Catholic entrepreneur needs to have that openness to in my past, I've had people that have given me opportunities when I didn't deserve to be there or I wasn't the right person. And I've adopted that, I think, into the company, and I've given opportunities to. There's an engineer that I'm speaking in particular. Like, it was his first job out of a boot camp, a software engineering boot camp, and he is incredible. He's like self-taught in many ways, and this has been and he's progressed throughout the company, and has other mentors within the team. But like this, no other company, I would think, at least in the startup venture technology space, they would have seen that resume, and it would have not been a thing. And now he's someone that leads a lot of our development.
Yeah. I think this is just an interesting point. This idea that you said we had opportunities that we should have never been able to, right? And I think pretty much everybody, again, anybody who's being honest, I believe, recognizes that they've had those moments in their life. And if we think about it from a spiritual side of things, the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross is something that none of us deserve. The opportunity to be able to actually have eternal life is something none of us deserve. And I really appreciate you sharing this, because I think that the idea of giving opportunities to, maybe not the most tenured person or the person who doesn't have the perfect resume is really important, because we all have to be willing to give opportunities. And there's a certain thing, like, again, I work in recruitment, so I get the idea of hiring the best talent that you can find. But there's also, you have to have some trust, because it's becoming an increasingly difficult world where nobody wants to hire junior talent, because I can get somebody a little more senior who will do it, or we can just kind of replace their job with AI to an extent. And I think that we have a responsibility to continue developing people, because this is part of the reason why we see so many people being very against large corporations, because they're not doing it well. So I appreciate you sharing this. I feel like I need to reflect on some of this more, but this is really, really, really helpful. Let's see, where should we go from here? We're running out of time. Do you have a little bit of time to go over if we do?
Yes.
All right, cool. Let's keep going. So on top of all of this stuff that you do, you mentioned that you co-founded Sent Angels, which used to be called Catholic Angels. But can you talk just a little bit more about this and kind of how that came together, and what you guys are really aiming to do? Just kind of give the pitch there.
Sure, yeah. So when I was starting Tabella, I knew I was going to build this Catholic company, right? Not only from the product, but just internally as a team. And I went out to the world to raise money, and I sat down with venture capitalists, investors, and like that story I just mentioned, I quickly found that it was very, very difficult to find someone that wasn't just seeing this for the business opportunity that it is of, wow, they were looking at it more like religion and something happening in the faith world, and it's untapped, and there's no one serving that, so it's a massive market, and now you see things with like AI even. And anyway, a lot of people were looking at the business opportunity of it. And when I wanted to have those discussions of like, wait, yes, the business opportunity is here, but this is also a mission. Our mission is to bring the world closer to the sacraments. That was just like, yeah, but make sure you're focused on the business side of things. And that's not what I had intended to do. So it was very difficult to find people that were aligned and that truly saw this as a way to build something with God, and that God is at the center of it. And so I talked to more and more entrepreneurs. I used to train entrepreneurs before Tabella, and so I have tons of entrepreneur friends. And it was very similar, at least even if they weren't Catholic, but they might be of other Christian denominations, and they found the same thing. It's like with their investor, they couldn't relate to that level, and it was very transactional. And so that started a big journey of like, man, I really wish I could have Catholic investors on my cap table. And thankfully I found many of them. That you should see I would have this Excel or Airtable of lists of just venture fund after venture fund after venture fund, and angel investor after no, yes, here and there. But then I had a mission alignment tab of like, can I have conversations like this with this person? Do they get the missional aspect? And so that was a very long process. But anyway, out of that, in that process, I met a gentleman called John Cannon, who I think maybe and a lot of people maybe listening know. He's just a powerhouse in at the intersection of faith and business, and what he created at Cent Ventures is incredible. But from that, a friendship developed, and we started talking a little bit about this, and also with Zach, who's a partner at a secular venture fund, but very devout himself. And we kind of came together at this intersection of, hey, me as an entrepreneur with some venture capital background, I've seen that it's been very difficult, like for these Catholic missions, to find Catholic aligned investors. John brought a lot of that too in his network. And then Zach, from the venture perspective, seeing, the types of things that happen in the venture world. And that kind of just created this little, storm of ideas. And we said, hey, so I went back to my, what I used to do. And the very first thing, I would travel the world and start these entrepreneurship ecosystems. And the very first thing that Tim Draper, an old boss of mine, taught me is start something capital related, because if you find the capital people, that will naturally just fuel those ecosystems around the world. It doesn't need to be Silicon Valley money going into outside ecosystems. No, take the capital of the entrepreneurs that have made it in those ecosystems, and they're going to be the most resourceful and the most helpful. And so we would start these little angel networks or little hubs for entrepreneurship. So I kind of took that mentality or the learnings there, and we put together this angel network of, hey, there are a lot of people that I knew and that John knew and that Zach knew that had a level of wealth that wanted to give forward. And sure, they might do philanthropic things and donations, but they're also business people, and they've made it, and they have all these different talents. What if they could be the ones supporting these Catholic aligned ventures? It doesn't have to be a Tabella per se, but it could be a company that's advancing Catholic values. And so we have a few companies in the portfolio that are not necessarily explicitly Catholic, as like a Tabella serving the Catholic market, but the company is Catholic values aligned, and that's been great. And so in practicality, if you're an entrepreneur, you pitch to the network, and we've got a community of angel investors, and if there's enough interest capital wise at that very moment, we put together an investment. And so as a group, we come together, and some of them write smaller checks, some of them bigger, but as a whole, now you're getting, say, a $200,000 check into your startup from Catholic Angels, which we changed the name to Cent Angels. And that's what we do. We pool all these. And then you also get, as an entrepreneur, imagine this, sure, there's one line item on the cap table because that keeps things very clean for an entrepreneur. I know that because I've had all sorts of different angel investors in my cap table. But you also get this big value of, wow, all these business people, men and women that, live out their faith truly, that God is at the center of everything, and they also have capital. And now they're my supporters, right? They're the ones that I can go to for advice. And when you have different kinds of angel investors, one might be a tax expert, one might be, a healthcare expert. And so when you need something, there's a network, a pool of people, kind of like the thing that we were talking about of how do we do business within a small community. This just happens to be at, in a more digital landscape per se. But yeah, you've got this group of Catholic individuals that are there for you, building this with you and seeing the journey.
Yeah, it's super valuable to have the community thing. We've talked about this a lot on past episodes of people about building community with other entrepreneurs. So I think there's a lot of value there. Out of curiosity, do you see this growing to some extent where it's like, hey, in the future we're going to invest in Catholic entrepreneurs, not necessarily ones who are building a faith specific related company, right? Like I'm just a local guy. I want to start my own plumbing shop, whatever. Is that going to be something in the future? Because I think that there's a lot of opportunity outside of just Catholic or Catholic-oriented ventures.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the opportunity that kind of from our backgrounds of where we were naturally just led us to the high growth type of venture, a backable business. But we've had many discussions of, because we get also applicants of smaller, say, local businesses that maybe saw it and they're like, oh wow, like I can be put in front of capital here, but there's some requirements there. So we've had many discussions. Yeah, I think there's something happening, and maybe it's through us, maybe it's through the work John has done through Cent Ventures and other people that have been tinkering with these kind of things. But I definitely think there's this movement of, investors. Is it a fund? Is it, I just, from my experience, all I've known is that, venture type of business. But we've had a lot of discussions of how do we create an ecosystem, and it is happening. It's slow, but it's happening. And so, I point everyone listening to Cent Ventures, because that's an incredible organization that's done incredible work with business leaders, and Catholic or Cent Angels stemmed out of that in many ways. And so, yeah, I think there's an ecosystem of things happening. And the more and more people I speak about, even some of the angel investors in our network, they've asked about this, like, hey, how do I support? There's a member that just joined that actually supports local businesses in Haiti with very small investments that are very big over there, but it's into local entrepreneurs. And so I think there's a lot of that moving. I don't have the answer per se on how to make that happen or the vehicles to make that happen right now. And so we're focused more on that high growth, venture-backed type of startup at the moment. And I think that there is a big opportunity to lean into all these things.
Yeah, I think it will all come with time, because I believe that we need to incentivize many people to start their own businesses again, because just the way that a lot of corporations treat the people, even smaller corporations in regional, areas, not big multinationals, they do not. The way people are treated is very much like a number, and oftentimes, it's very difficult to provide for a family on one income, and there's certain, lack of flexibility that they have. But if you run your own business, you may make only, a bit more, but there's certain flexibilities you get that you can spend time with your family. You can have lunch with your kids, or like all these things, right? And I want to see more of that. So, we'll be talking more about this, I'm sure, offline, but let's keep moving here. Just this last episode I recorded with Nathan Crankfield, we talked a lot about living a balanced life. And oftentimes entrepreneurs tend to be, they usually say, hey, you got to go all in on one thing. And you just got to absolutely focus and just, no friends, whatever, right? Alex Hormozy style. But we obviously believe that we need to live a balanced life with our faith, with our family. So what are some of the ways that you do this? And I'm particularly interested in maybe the family life and staying in shape too, because I think it's very easy as an entrepreneur to just like completely forget about your exercise.
The family life last year was a very big one for that. And not only because I was going into marriage and now that we have a little baby on the way. There's a lot of that. But a big one for me was kind of, you mentioned this earlier, how do we have these like, more community or like the people around us? And I thank God he made this happen and he gave me the opportunity. My parents used to live in Miami. Their whole, ever since we got to this country, I lived in Texas the past few years, and I had the incredible opportunity to be able to move them here. And they practically lived for almost like a year, literally, next to me. And then as I got into marriage and everything, now they live about probably like 10 minutes away. I was able to put them in a nice apartment. A lot of great things have happened there. But having that, truly trying to focus on how do we get family around us. And for me, it was my mom, my dad, my sister also lives here in Texas. And so I get to see her pretty often. How to optimize. And I know not everyone's able to do that, right? If they live in different states, etc. But something that where my heart has taken me the past few years was that was a big dream of mine. How can I have my family that I'm creating, my wife, my children and my future children and their grandparents and from both sides, like how do we make this happen where we could be together? So that's been a big focus, I think, family life, and it makes things easier. It's not a big plan of, oh, when will we see each other? Like, we have to travel. But it could be very spontaneous now. It's like yesterday, for example, I picked up the phone. I said, hey, Dad, I'm going to pick you up. Let's go grab lunch together. And we were able to just do that. And what a real blessing. And so optimizing for that, at least personally, that's what I've been trying to do the past few years. And I'm in a position that I've been able to make that happen. Health-wise, an interesting thing that I think it's kind of, I messaged you about this last night, but I am a spin instructor. And so I don't think you'll find many Catholic entrepreneurs per se as in a spin studio. I actually go quite a bit because I need to stay in shape in order to be able to teach. But I've seen that's been a really there's a whole story there. I got rejected many years ago from a studio because I didn't even speak about religion or anything, but I think they saw my background. And then in the last audition, they were like, hey, you're going to be a spin instructor with us, but just so you know, you can't like preach from the bike. I was like, hold on a second. What? And then they ended up not, you teach every few weeks, but ended up not hiring me there. And then I went through this process of a little local studio here near me, and they ended up really liking me. And now I get to teach classes. So in fact, tonight I teach a spin class, which is so interesting. Right? Like, I'm moving from this podcast to a team meeting with Tabella, and I've got a few meetings lined up. But later on tonight, I know that I have to switch completely into this other, and I wouldn't call it even other versions, just a version that maybe people on the my religious networks don't see as much. But I'm super happy about that. And if I could just say one thing, I'm seeing this as an opportunity to evangelize, and it's like God somehow gave me this talent, and I've talked on the bike about it. I was born with one of my feet completely turned, and so I had to wear a brace, for many years as a kid. And, there was a big miracle there where it's like, I can walk perfectly, I can run perfectly. And so, wow, this happened. Why, I can use this, to inspire others and to look toward God. And so I've told that story at the spin studio, to people of all different faiths. And I've got a class, a Christian music class coming up that they approved, that I'm super pumped about. You don't see this at like these secular spin studios. It's all, secular music, and it's a great environment for a workout. You don't feel like you're working out. Like you're just like, in music and focus, but it's an incredible hit workout. But I've got this praise and pedal class that I got approved. And so, I hope that God can use that talent of, being great on a static bike, if that's anything to anybody, but, and being able to inspire people on it and coach them through a great workout. I hope he can use that. And I've already been seeing it to bring his word to places that naturally you don't hear his word in.
Yeah, I mean, two things there is like, one, I appreciate how you found a way to integrate it, because it's very difficult to stick with other habits if you don't find a way to integrate it. So both on the family and the exercise piece, you've made a way to make it impossible not to do those things, right? You've made it so you have to do them, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs can benefit from creating those habits. And I also appreciate the way you try to do everything very well, even if you don't talk about your faith at all. Even if you just do what you do at the spin class very well, it's going to affect people, right? They're going to be like, wow, this person's different, because they genuinely care about doing it well.
Oh yeah, they follow me on Instagram, for example, and then they see, oh, what is this Catholic thing? And then this other thing. And it's led to incredible conversations. And so, yes, I think we can show up to things and do it, and that's the talent God has given us. And that's what he can use to bring people to him. And so I don't necessarily know exactly how that'll happen, but I've already seen it in the short amount of time that I've been in that position, per se. It's just led to incredible conversations, now to a whole class, like a hit workout with just, praise music. I'm super pumped about that. I don't think that's been done here that much. And so, yeah, God will use it in the way he needs it. And for me, physically, I mean, I have to stay in top-notch shape to be able to teach a 45-minute class, talking and doing this thing that you're burning like 500, 600 calories in that moment.
Yeah, man, you have to start playing pickleball instead. It's much more fun. I'm not a big bike person, but I understand a lot of people love it. So let's cover one more major topic, then we'll go to rapid fire, and then we'll wrap up. So one thing, and I think you probably could give a pretty good perspective on this, is that a lot of Catholic entrepreneurs tend to over-spiritualize things, like, oh, God called me to this. And then in a lot of cases, people who may have otherwise been very good business people will just make really, really bad decisions, because like, oh no, it's like, this is just what God's calling me to, and they kind of throw their reason out the window. So how do you, especially building a specifically Catholic product, how do you try to balance this idea of like, what is God calling me to versus what is the best business decision?
I am not necessarily the best. I don't have necessarily. I'll just tell you what I've done, and I don't know if this is what other entrepreneurs do. And yes, I have heard, oh, like God called me to do this. And I don't know, to each person, like whatever their how it led them, you have to just explore. I know the ways that I would say he's called me. I think at the very beginning, I was seeing a lot of, yes, the opportunity in the market, and like I want to do tech things in this idea that was in my heart from a long time ago that I didn't think anything of. But slowly, more and more, like if it started 50-50 of like business opportunity and mission, the mission has kind of expanded even more now that the business has more solid legs, and there's product market fit and there's revenue and all these things. Naturally, the missional perspective has kind of just been a bigger percentage. Personally, truly, when I started, I would look at before, and maybe this is when I was a little bit more away from practicing the faith as I should, I would look at that. I'm like, what do people mean by like they're called to do this and they heard God speaking? I didn't get that much. Truly, when I started going to adoration consistently, and there's another thing about life and putting the pieces in the puzzle, and that's why I'm in such a fortunate state right now of life. It's like I have a little adoration chapel that opens from like 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. And it's less than 10 minutes away. And so truly, when I started sitting just at adoration, I didn't even know what it truly was, right? Like, what do you do in adoration? Sure, I can pray, I can do my prayers, I can do a rosary. But then there's moments that I've walked in there where I'm like, God, I have no clue, like, what, I'm just going to sit here. And in those moments, truly, I've either sparks of ideas that have come, or, feeling better about a particular decision. Adoration has been that for me, and that's what I've tried to focus my business decisions around, is when there's something difficult or even something small, it's like, hey, I got to make sure that there's room this week for sitting at the adoration chapel and just sitting with God with this. And truly, what I told you before of the trust element of just, I don't know the best decision for this, I'm putting it here. And man, and like a day later, 2 days later, something happens, or I get an email about something, and it's almost like a little signal. And so one thing that I try not to do is present God with like, is it A or B, Lord? Like, give me the answer here. It's only these two things. And this has been a more of a trust element too, right? Of growing in that, of like, no, there's no A or B. There's C, D, E. Like, there's all sorts of paths here. I don't know which one it is, but please, like, I'm just giving it to you. And more often than not, it's not A or B. Like, he's shown some other thing a few days later. And so I don't know if that particularly answers with the perspective of the question, or like the what you were trying to get out of it, but at least for me, business decisions, I've balanced it with just sitting at an adoration chapel.
I think that it's worth noting that a lot of the best secular entrepreneurs talk about, I think I would say Hormozy is like this. He talk about spending time, as you buy yourself more time through hiring and through growing the business, you have more time to reflect on how you've done things, and that's how he develops such amazing frameworks. And I think that setting aside time for adoration is a very similar thing, but obviously in a much holier sense, right? That you're seeking guidance from God. And some people don't like this kind of aspect of being so focused on making every decision a decision for God to make. But at the same time, I think that regardless if your business is Catholic externally in nature, like Tabella, or it's just, like I said, a plumbing, like you do plumbing or whatever, I still think that these things should be brought to God, because he gave us the skills to do this, and he called us to entrepreneurship to an extent. And we don't know what the end purpose is, because we know that it's not just about money, right? We want to provide for our families. That's obviously part of it. But the intention of all of this, he doesn't have this or give this to us and put it on our hearts just to go out and become, millionaires. That's not the point. So what is the point? What are we called to? How are we called to use the platform, to use the business, to evangelize in some way? And, for all we know, maybe those business decisions aren't so much about the business itself. Maybe it's going to be about how can I use the rewards I've received to benefit my local communities, to just to help this person I see on the street all the time. Like, there's a lot of things it could be. So I appreciate it. And I think this is the way I end up leaning towards more. I'm guilty of, usually in mass, most of my ideas come in mass. I have a
Yeah.
really hard time not thinking about business at mass, so I apologize for that.
I have a very hard time at adoration. It's a constant thing of like all these business things pop up. But, someone told me it's like, hey, if you're sitting there and that in your state of just sitting here, there's no phone, there's nothing, right? And I'm just with God, and these things are popping up, just like instead of just pushing away from them of like, no, 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 I need to focus on this other thing. It's just like, no, let God, like maybe there's something there. And it's just like, let's have a conversation, God, about these things that are, popping up in my mind and heart. And so I've found that helpful, and not so to not be so prescriptive of like what does my prayer need to look like. At the end of the day, adoration is that we're having directly with God in front of us, present, a conversation. And if you
Yeah.
were sitting down with a friend and business ideas kept popping up, that's what you would speak about. And so, yeah, it's my place to have a conversation, or hear him as best as I can.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think we want to have prescriptive ways of doing things, but in a lot of cases, you mentioned this, right? You were trying to hire Catholics initially, and then you started hiring beyond that, and some crazy things happened that you would have never expected. And this is the whole point: is that God knows so much more than us. There's no way we could ever understand and make these decisions fully, with what He has in mind, which is a good thing. So let's start wrapping up here with rapid fire things. So, are there any particular scripture references, or maybe specific spiritual books that you really inspire you from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Well, I grew up literally every day. I remember in Venezuela learning this prayer. We used to live in this little room. My mom, my dad, and I was a little kid, and we lived in this tiny room, probably the size of, half this office right now. And my dad taught me Psalm 23, and we would pray it many times a day, and so for every single day of my life, I've recited Psalm 23. So when someone asks me about a Bible passage, somehow it always leads there. And there's just like, even because I learned it in Spanish, but as I've read it in English also, there's even so much more to unpack. But it starts with, the Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I lack. And, maybe back to those conversations we were having, it's like God will put the resources that He needs. You don't lack anything. And I know that there's more spiritual elements to it, but when it comes to entrepreneurship, hey, if you are doing the work, if you are giving God your talent, He literally is telling you there is nothing that you will lack. Just give it to Him and follow the shepherd, right? And so that's what I would point people to. Psalm 23 has been huge from a daily cadence in all the entrepreneurial things I've done.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. And what is an entrepreneur that really inspires you, and why?
My dad, I think I saw him go from taking us out of a country that was limited in opportunities and building an incredible business without speaking a word of English. And, he used to have this dubbing studio for movies and soap operas. And I saw him go, grow that. And I really saw the way he treated people. And so I think that's why my story is very impactful. When he got sick and his business shut down, and we went into like a deep, deep hole, I would say, of financially and a lot of things. I saw a lot of people that he had helped not help him in return, or even do things to not like to make sure that he kept losing everything. I saw him throughout all of that, and as an entrepreneur, I've seen kind of the his transformation, and the biggest lessons, entrepreneurship wise, especially connected to the faith, have come from his experience. My dad has been my biggest entrepreneurial. I know people might want to hear, oh, like Elon Musk or all these things, but truly, it's been my dad.
No, I love that. And what is who is one of your favorite saints?
Always, I got to go to the Queen and our mother, Our Lady. Yeah, yes, people know, like the people that know me, they know they call me a mama's boy, and sometimes people get offended at that. I actually like it. I'm like, yes, I'm a mama's boy with my mom here on earth. Like I've become, and I want to be even a bigger mama's boy of, Our Lady.
Yeah, no, I love that. Our Lady is always there for us. And then any particular favorite devotions?
Adoration. Oh my goodness, that was such a game changer in terms of how I just live my life, being able to find a chapel that I could just go sit in. And I know it's not available everywhere, but even if you just go sit at the church, even if the sacrament's not exposed, like just go sit there. But adoration has been huge for me on a week-to-week cadence, obviously beyond mass and all of these things. But for me, the devotion, there's more like the rosary, etc. But like just sitting, I think outside of the adoration chapel, there's just so much coming at me, from phone and the company and all these things, right? Even like with the music at the studio, what am I going to teach tonight? Like all these things are just constantly bombarding. And when I go into the adoration chapel, it's like there's this peace and silence that naturally comes with it. And even though all these things still spark, there's almost like it's not a anxious type of spark where it's like I got to do this or this. It's just like these thoughts still come up, but I'm able to have peace around them. Kind of like peace in like covers the same sparks, where outside of that adoration chapel, they might be seen or I might be a little anxious or like this is happening. But at the adoration chapel, they kind of get covered with peace.
Yeah, well, one thing my friend TK Coleman told me is that you don't have to, even if you don't have adoration, exposed adoration, you can still go to a church, right? God's still there, right? So I encourage people never to use it as an excuse, right? And always to see those opportunities. So this has been great. I mean, we've been on this for an hour and a half almost here. Let's just wrap up with, where can people reach you if they're interested in, if they're, parish leader and they want to get Tabella, and where can people reach if they want to be part of the Sent Angels Network or apply to receive funding?
Yeah, for Tabella, just type in Tabella on Google with a double L, or go to tabella.app, and you can get started. When I say it's free, it truly is free. There's not a contract. If you're a parish leader looking for the best tech for your parish, there's no contracts, there's no payment, none of that. We just want to deliver great value, in that just how you didn't have to pay to use a Facebook and that's where you have your community now. Why don't you bring them to a safe Catholic space that has tons of devotional resources? If you're just a Catholic listening to this, would love for you to download Tabella. There's a lot of great content on there and bear with us. You're probably entrepreneurs, like send us feedback, help us out. We'll make the product better and better, at least the consumer facing what you see. On the parish side, we're doing quite a lot. And then for Sent Angels, please, if you're an entrepreneur and you're seeking funding for your startup, we've got a pitch competition coming up. So we have 4 funding cycles. So even if this is not the right cycle for you because you're not raising money or part of a fundraising process in the moment, take a look at those 4 fundraising cycles. You can visit catholicangels.co to learn more. But we've got this pitch competition coming up, which as of today, we have about 35 days that the application will still be open. And so please apply to that. There's over $50,000 in prizes, 10,000 of that being a cash prize, and it'll be at the Sent Summit. And so you also get tickets for that if you're the one selected to pitch. It's an incredible competition. We've done it twice already. And I will say that the winners of those competitions, and we pick about 4 to 5 startups out of dozens that apply, the winners have actually gone on to raise money from our angel network also. So it hasn't only been the 5K or the 10K cash prizes we've given that's equity free. It's also turned into incredible connections, and then over $500,000 in funding that we've deployed into those startups. And so please take a look at that. You can find it at catholicangels.co, or if you go to sentventures.com/pitch, you will see all the details for the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been pumping that out on the newsletter too. So I encourage people, if you're not already, try to get into the Sent Summit this year. It's gonna be amazing. I went last year and I really enjoyed it. So, all right, man, this has been a pleasure. We're gonna have to have you on again. There's so much we didn't cover, but thank you for the work you're doing, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, man. God bless.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us 5 stars wherever you listen. And if not already, give us a follow on YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers eventually. So if you can help us get there, that'd be great. And if you want to, if you haven't already, do subscribe to our free Monday newsletters that comes out called The Saintly CEO, where we give a bit of advice on how to run your business more like a saint in a very succinct manner, as well as highlight a few other Catholic entrepreneurs for you to meet. And then if you're looking for a group of Catholic entrepreneurs to build with, to learn from, consider joining our Catholic Founders Peer Group. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. Just go to our Substack and upgrade to paid. Once we vet you and make sure everything's good, we'll get you added to that group chat right away. And you also get access to all of our paywalled content as part of this. So thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.